Okay, a royal birth is typically handled with precision and tradition, but Meghan Markle and Prince Harry managed to turn it into a bewildering mess full of contradictions, secrecy, and what many now believe was a full-blown cover-up. This is not because of the baby himself, but rather because of the circus that surrounded his arrival. Let's talk about one of the strangest, most chaotic royal moments that just won't go away: Prince Archie's birth.
I will say that, like a lot of people, I saw the Getty images of the pillow dropping behind the skirt, and I thought at first they could be photoshopped, but Getty images is very reliable.
The official story was straightforward enough. Meghan went into labor early in the morning, gave birth, and the palace made an announcement later that day. However, when you start peeling back the layers, nothing adds up. For instance, Meghan supposedly went into labor early in the morning, but the palace waited nearly 12 hours to tell the media why. This made it even more confusing because by the time they made the announcement, Meghan had already given birth. You might think that this was just a private moment for them, but the truth is that Harry and Meghan's PR team had previously promised to notify the media when she went into labor, and then abruptly fell silent. People can argue whether Meghan used a surrogate, whether she wore a moon bump, or whether any of the theories circulating are true, but those details aren't even the point. The point is that Harry and Meghan lied, the palace lied on their behalf, and if there's one thing the monarchy isn't supposed to do, it's lie about the fundamentals of succession. In other words, it gets worse during the brief period between the palace claiming Meghan was in labor and the Instagram post announcing the baby's birth. Journalists asked directly if the baby had already been born, and palace officials denied it. Dan Wooden, an executive editor at The Sun in 2019, and likely the first mainstream journalist to highlight how strange this whole situation was, is one person who has been beating this drum for years. He even forced Buckingham Palace to answer 8 direct questions about Archie's birth on the record, an almost unprecedented move that should tell you how shaken they were. The palace knew something didn't look right. The palace denied it, of course, but when every move seems to help the Sussex's American PR game, it's hard not to raise an eyebrow. Dan's main theory was that the announcement was purposefully delayed to coincide with the U.S. morning news cycle. He pointed out how the timing of everything lined up perfectly with 8 a.m. New York shows like CBS This Morning, where Gayle King just so happens to be Meghan's friend. This isn't about attacking Meghan for the sake of attacking her, it's about transparency. You cannot play the "we want privacy" card while simultaneously doing picture shoots and releasing carefully chosen films if you are a royal couple with a child in the line of succession, and you are a taxpayer-funded pair. Meghan's bump became its own storyline. This was not just bad PR, it was a complete media disaster. If the intention was to protect their privacy, it backfired spectacularly because no one now trusts the story they told, the timeline, the announcements, or even the baby bump. Once you lose public trust, especially as a royal, it's nearly impossible to regain it. The first time the internet saw it, it appeared enormous. The next day, it was nearly flat, and videos appeared of her stomach folding as she sat down. These videos sparked wild speculation about whether it was a moon bump or a padded prosthetic. Rather than putting an end to the rumors, Harry and Meghan leaned further into secrecy, and the silence only made people more certain that something was being concealed. The mainstream media didn't want to get involved because it was too controversial and too close to conspiracy, but that's where journalism lost its edge. The job isn't to shield people from awkward questions, it's to ask them. Meghan's pregnancy was full of questions, but major media outlets avoided them. Only a select few, like Dan Wooten, were prepared to challenge the palace, and when they did, their responses were generic and robotic, never getting to the heart of the matter. Why the lies? One particular moment caught people's attention. Meghan was allegedly in labor with baby Leet, but at the same time, a video of her dancing, smiling, and appearing totally at ease was released. The timeline didn't make sense, and even people who hadn't thought twice about the first pregnancy began to wonder, hold on, what is going on here? Respected Daily Telegraph associate editor Camila Tominey wrote about it, but she never once thought that the bump may be false. When questioned, she reacted as though it were beneath her to even ask the question, which is the issue. Pretending to be too respectable to investigate real contradictions. If the palace had stuck to tradition and simply told the truth, or even half the truth, none of this would have spiraled. But once you start lying, every new move looks suspicious. Nonetheless, more bizarre was how the palace handled Harry and Meghan's communication strategy. It was chaotic. Announcements were delayed, communications supposedly went unsent, timelines didn't match. At one point, the palace actually blamed a technical issue. for not alerting the press on time in 2019. As if phones don't exist, it wasn't just a misstep, it looked like a clumsy covers-up, and Buckingham Palace, the symbol of order and protocol, suddenly looked disorganized and weak. And then there's the Instagram post. That's how the world officially found out about Archie's birth. Not a formal royal statement, not a common press conference, just a post on social media. And during that brief window when journalists asked if Meghan had given birth, the palace straight up declared no. They denied it, knowing full well the baby was already born. That's the part that crosses the line, because that's not a spin, that's just lying. Harry and Meghan's team attempted to frame everything around privacy. But public trust takes precedence over privacy when your child is vying for the throne. You're not just a couple, you're an institution, and you can't change royal tradition just because you want to. Every time they attempted to do so, it backfired, and worse, they took the palace down with them. Buckingham Palace lost credibility because it seemed to be following their example rather than setting the tone. What's so frustrating is that the entire situation left royal watchers perplexed, journalists frustrated, and the public suspicious. It wasn't just a mishandled media strategy, it became a symbol of how strained things had become between Harry, Meghan, and the crown. Instead of being a moment of celebration, unity, and even modernity, it turned into a masterclass in how not to handle royal communication. The questions continued to come in after Archie was born, with the most significant one being about the photo call at Windsor Castle, where Harry and Meghan introduced their child to the world in a carefully planned moment with no outside press. It was scheduled for 12:40 p.m. UK time, which coincidentally coincided with the 7:40 a.m. broadcast slot on American morning shows. Did this happen by accident, or were the Sussexes more concerned with their U.S. media presence than their role within the British monarchy? Dan Wooden went straight to the palace and asked if the photo call time was chosen to coincide with American news shows. The palace gave a cold, scripted response. No. The time was chosen because the family was visiting Windsor to introduce Archie to the Queen and Prince Philip, but even that didn't line up. It felt strange that one of the most anticipated public moments, a royal photo op, would be arranged around a private family visit. Another mystery is where Archie was born. Harry talked about the experience in glowing, emotional detail, describing how amazing Meghan was during labor, but the palace refused to confirm the birthplace. This alone sparked rumors because every royal baby before him had their birthplace confirmed, so why hide this if it was just a typical hospital birth? The refusal to answer only stoked people's curiosity. Then there was the line of succession, since Archie is Prince Harry's son and a direct descendant in the royal line, which means legal documentation. Proper announcement procedures and formal acknowledgement from the palace are critical, but with this birth the usual sign-offs were a combination of late, vague, or completely missing. Royal birth announcements are typically marked with details like the attending physician, the hospital, and a statement outside the palace. None of that happened. Instead, we got a delayed press release in a filtered Instagram message to make things greater confusing. The palace initially tried to act like nothing was unusual, but the contradictions were piling up. One outlet was told Meghan went into labor, another was told she'd already given birth, and when reporters pressed for clarity, the palace was press officers got KY. At one point, they even claimed the announcement was delayed due to an email failure. That's the excuse in a palace filled with staff advisors and PR pros. They claimed an email didn't go out in time. If this had happened once, people might have let it go, but the whole thing was tangled within inconsistency after inconsistency. Meghan and Harry wanted to modernize the monarchy, but they ended up introducing chaos. They didn't seem to understand, or maybe didn't care, that when you wear the crown's weight, you don't get to command the narrative completely, and when you try, the backlash can be brutal. Their actions didn't just raise eyebrows, they created a vacuum of trust, and in that vacuum, theories exploded. Some claimed Meghan had used a surrogate, others believe she wore a fake, but more extreme take said Archie was a borrowed baby, or that he didn't even exist. What we do know beyond all the speculation is that Meghan and Harry lied, the palace supported them, and the public was left with a royal mystery that hasn't been resolved. These theories weren't created overnight. They were born out of the couple's unwillingness to communicate clearly, and the palace's unwillingness to demand it. This was never about hate. Rather, it was about the truth, and the truth is still missing.